This Lenten season, as you can see from your bulletins, we will be taking up the questions of the cross, is how I've labeled it, but it's really the questions of the Passion. Throughout the Passion narrative, there are various questions that pop up from all sorts of people, ranging from Jesus to Pilate to his disciples to bystanders, and we're going to take up each one of those as a reflection for our sermons the coming weeks. But this week, I just wanted to talk briefly about Lent itself and some of the practices and habits that we have during Lent, and use this passage from Matthew 6 to kind of guide our hearts in that and in those actions. Because we all know that it's not always the what that matters, but the hows. So, like, you can do a lot of things, but it kind of matters how you do it. Let me give you an example. So, you can apologize. Like, when I would get in trouble when I was a kid, my mom would call me downstairs, and she would say, yada, 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 you did this, you did that. Apologize to your sister. And I can have an apology is a what. That's what you're supposed to do, is apologize. But there's a whole host of ways that I can apologize. So the how really matters. And the majority of the time, when I would apologize, it would go like this. I would say, well, sorry. And every one of you parents know that, like, that's a how that does not fly in your house. Right? It doesn't work. So the what matters, the what's fine. Apologizing is good. But the how is probably more important, actually, than even the what. And so, this passage in Matthew 6 goes through a series of what's. Right? And those are listed in your bulletin. It's giving, praying, and sacrificing, or like fasting, is the way that Matthew 6 talks about. Those are the what's. But when Jesus is talking to his disciples, he's a lot more concerned with the hows. Because he assumes that they're going to do the what's. But the hows are what matter. And so I just want to go through those to kind of think about them as we enter into this Lenten season, because Lent, you hear a lot of what's. What are you giving up for Lent? What are you doing for Lent? Are you going to church on Ash Wednesday? These are all the what's. But it's important at the outset to talk about the hows, how we're doing these things, and what the point is. So Matthew 6 gives 3 what's, and it explains the hows of it. So I want to just talk about that, because each one of these things is a very prominent action that we do in Lent. We're supposed to give something. We're supposed to pray. We're supposed to sacrifice. And we're supposed to focus on God and spend time meditating. But how do you do these things? How do you do these things? So let's touch on the first one, giving. And it's not just giving, but it's giving without expecting. Okay, that's the blank. Giving. It's not going to show up on the screen, but that's the blank. Giving without expecting. Giving without expecting. Here's what Jesus says. Okay. He says, "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men." Okay? He's talking to his disciples. To be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So, when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by men. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. So, we're supposed to give without expecting, and that's a little bit short. We're really supposed to give without expecting praise from men. Okay? Okay? Give without expecting somebody to notice. Give without expecting somebody to give you a pat on the back. Have you ever known somebody who's just really a wonderful giver? Somebody who they give without expecting anything back. They didn't want any praise or any money or a pat on the back. In fact, if they had it their way, they would probably just not be seen at all doing these things. Caring for somebody, there was a man at the church that I grew up in Omaha. His name was Vern, and this guy was outstanding in this sort of thing. He was a retired man, but you would always hear secondhand of the ways that he was giving people. Right? Like he would be over at shut-ins' houses, like cleaning for them. He would be out in the neighborhood, like just all day long trying to find people jobs. And this guy was just a giver. And he had a wonderful, wonderful heart. But he never wanted at all to be noticed. Didn't want a pat on the back, didn't want anybody to acknowledge him. He just wanted to serve. Right? He didn't expect any reward from any person. And if you would bring it up to him, he would just sort of like cast you off and walk away. So you'd say, "Hey, I heard you over at Bev's house last week, like helping her paint her house." And he'd say, yeah, whatever. And he'd leave. And that's just sort of the way that he did things. And that's a great example, I think, of somebody giving without expecting any praise from men. God says that we should love our neighbors and care for them because they're our neighbors, not because we have an ulterior motive in mind for praise from somebody or announcing the things that we're doing. We don't need a ribbon ceremony. We don't need a big check to hand out. We give because we're commanded to and because we love our neighbors. So that's the first what, and that's the first how, is that we're supposed to give without expectation of praise or reward from them. The second is praying. That's the what, and the how is without worrying. Without worrying. Jesus says, and when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by men. I tell you the truth, they've received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. When I say pray without worrying, in this passage, the person that's praying is worrying about other people watching. So they're concerned with people noticing their own eloquence and how well they pray to God, and how beautifully they talk to God. Now, I don't think that that's a huge deal among our congregation, or maybe in very many people in the United States, because most people are deathly afraid to pray in public. I mean, the majority of people that I talk to are terrified. My dad used to ask me to pray every once in a while because I was sort of the Christian in the household. So he'd ask me to pray for our dinner, or pray at family gatherings and stuff like that. And he'd always ask me really impromptu, he'd say, "Get up, just say a prayer for us." And I would always balk about halfway through. When you sort of stop having enough good things to say, and then you're not quite sure how you're going to wrap it up. And so you just sort of balk and then say amen. Well, I think that we, in sort of the opposite ways, like the Pharisees in this passage, worry about what other people think about how we talk to God. I mean, it's sort of a different motivation, but it's not really. We're concerned about not looking lofty enough. We're concerned about not having eloquent enough words to say to God. But Jesus says, pray without being concerned about that. Because what other people think about the way that we speak to God is not really of concern. What matters most is what God thinks of your words. Right? And God loves to speak to you. God loves having you speak to Him. So Jesus gives us plain words. He just says, when you pray, don't worry. Go into your room, sit down, and talk to your Father. And He will listen. And so, both giving and praying are a key aspect of Lent, and ones that we should engage in without expectation of praise from men, and also without worrying about not being able to say the best things to God, or not being able to have everything perfect. So those are two whats and two hows. And the third is sacrificing joyfully. Okay? Sacrificing joyfully, like fasting joyfully. But fasting, just in general, is really about removing things for something else. So it's making a sacrifice, but it's in hopes of looking and engaging in something else. So Jesus says to do this joyfully. He says, when you fast, don't look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show men they are fasting. I tell you the truth, they've received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that you will not be obvious. It will not be obvious to men that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. I think this is fasting or sacrificing is often sort of a lost thing in our society. We're not much for giving things up. But during Lent is sort of the season where we drop some habits. We decide to give up chocolate, or we decide to give up cholesterol. And those things are all good, but I know in myself it can be easy when I will remove something that I really love in order to have a more focused time with the Lord, that I can be sort of like begrudging about it. And I'll come home and just want to kick the dog that I don't have because I don't get to eat, meat or my hamburgers or whatever. But Jesus says, watch your heart, watch your face, watch your attitude when you are devoting your time or your life to the Lord, because it's not about people knowing what you're giving up or how holy you are, but it's about our own connection with God. I saw a great little blog post today on giving up things for Lent. And there were some great things on there. This guy had 40 things that he was going to give up for Lent. And he had one of them was my comfort zone. One of those just finding ways to step out of his comfort zone. Another one was blaming people. Or blaming other people besides myself. I was going to give that up. Bitterness. Just being angry. That's something he's going to drop for Lent. And then one of the other ones that I really liked was quick fixes. Just finding ways to do kind of the bare minimum to fix things. And I thought that those were great things. And I think it's important for us this Lent to consider these practices and also the heart of it. Because the goal isn't really of Lent to give something up. The goal of Lent is to take something. So that's the last blank. The goal of Lent is really to take something. So giving and praying and fasting, they're all tangible physical activities that allow us to direct our desires to Christ and find our true comfort in Him. But the two great commandments that Jesus gave to us are not, in the most obvious sense, about giving, but rather they're about taking something up, right? So loving God and loving our neighbor. Those are the two great commandments of Jesus. And that is really what Lent is about, is refocusing on and taking up a love for God and a love for our neighbors. So what would it look like if Christians would take up the act of giving without expecting, or praying without worrying, or sacrificing joyfully in our communities? I think two things would happen, at least. One of them would be that people would get loved. People would be loved by that action, by Christians taking up that action. But secondly, I think what would happen if we were to really commit to these sorts of things is that Christians, we would see ourselves falter. And we would see ourselves not do that. We would see ourselves worrying about what people think. We would see ourselves giving but wanting some sort of praise back, or at least some sort of affirmation back from the things that we do. We would sacrifice, maybe begrudgingly. I think that we would see that if we really commit to these sorts of things, you can see the way that we want to continue to be selfish. And so maybe there would be a third thing that would happen too. And that would be that we would once again turn back to Jesus Christ. Which is really the true goal of Lent, is to turn back to Him. And there's no better way to do that than to love God and to love our neighbors, because we see the need that we have for somebody who really gives without expecting, really prays without worrying, really sacrifices joyfully. Because Jesus gave us His entire life without expecting anything back, without expecting praise or worship. He would often pray in the desert alone by Himself for us. And He sacrificed everything in His life joyfully for the joy set before Him. Right? That we would be reconciled back to God and back to one another. So I pray that your season of Lent is filled with giving without expectation, praying without worrying, and sacrificing joyfully, and also just leaning into your Savior, trusting in His cross, that when we see that we are imperfect and see our own sins, that we will see more clearly the great sacrifice that He made for us, and the great and wonderful gift that He gave us in the forgiveness of sins through His death and resurrection. Let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank You for Your sacrifice. We thank You for this Lenten season where we can give and pray and sacrifice. But more than anything, consider the way that You gave, the way that You sacrificed, the way that You prayed for us. And we ask that our hearts would be filled with those thoughts, not thoughts of ourselves, not thoughts of our own good deeds, but the thoughts of Your good deeds for us. Pray it all in Jesus' name.